Right, any transfers that we would have to do would have to come to the council between categories. That's correct. Yep. So that means we're not making any transfers between categories.
So you're not making any whatsoever?
None whatsoever between categories.
Bruce, on this, the fixed charges, I assume these are mandates?
Fixed charges are your insurances and your employee benefits.
So they've gone up 25%.
That's correct.
2005.
Yep, that's correct. Yep. And health insurance is your big driver there.
Now the benefits are set by negotiation between you and the.
Bargaining unions, that's
Okay,
correct.
And there's the teachers bargaining unit, and do the, like the support staff, teachers, custodians, administration. How many of those are collective, how many are unions, for lack of a better term?
All
Our
three.
administrators, our teachers, and our support staff, so we have three bargaining.
Yeah, we have 3 negotiation sessions.
Yes, Kim?
Excuse me, Bruce, if you could clarify for Mr. Holloway, there are transfers that are made that do not require county council approval.
Within category.
Right.
Yeah.
Within category, between the 6 objects, the board can approve transfers, but if we were going to move money from admin to instruction, for example, that would require county council approval. Thank you. Okay, let's go to the MOE page then, and we'll walk through that, since it has become a very complicated calculation since the law passed. It used to be that, on page 56, it used to be there were only 2 components of the calculation. What I refer to as the base or the minimum share analysis, which is that top line there, which each county must provide at least the amount equal to their local wealth times the local contribution rate. And for 2016 for Wycomico, it's $27,611,048. Or the amount that would equal the product, or the multiplying together the full-time equivalent enrollment in the current fiscal year and the local appropriation on a per pupil basis for the prior fiscal year. So walk you through that. So our highest county appropriation last year from the county was $37,676,790. Divide that by the 93013 full-time equivalent enrollment, gives you a appropriation per pupil. Multiply that appropriation per pupil times the new current year's full-time equivalent enrollment to come up with what now the maintenance of effort level is for the ensuing fiscal year 16. That's the 38,067,637. You compare that to the local share, whatever's greatest, that becomes the MOE level for the new fiscal year. That was under old law. Now, these add-ons, or what I call what-if statements, have been added to the calculation. First thing that the state of Maryland will do, will look at the county's education effort. And I've brought a copy for everybody so you can see this is what they're using. Pass some of those down. Got one for Mr. Holloway. No, I got it.
Are there any more?
I think we got enough.
Sure.
I think we got plenty.
Anybody need? Anybody didn't get one? Thank you, sir.
These are FTE for state aid purposes. No, but they're FTE for body count versus FTE for state aid. There's 3 different ways you calculate enrollment, believe it or not. I'll walk through that with you. Okay. So if, looking at the education effort handout that I just sent to you, what are the state will now do is they will look at a county's education effort, which is a percentage of the local wealth per pupil change, and then look at the 5-year moving average. So for example, in that counties below 5-year average column, you'll notice there's asterisks in next to several counties. Wycomico's current FY15 education effort's 1.04%. The county 5-year moving average is 1.21%. Everybody following that with me? Wycomico's education effort is below the 5-year moving average. So this second phase of the formula kicks in because of that if-then. If education efforts below the 5-year moving average, then this additional component of MOE calculation kicks in. So then it looks at, if yes, the per pupil amount calculated in 2 above must be increased by the lesser of. And again, forgive me for it seeming so complicated, but I'm going to try to drill it down to real simple. If your education effort is less than the 5-year state average, then a county's maintenance of effort must be adjusted if the county's wealth increases. In our case, the county's wealth per pupil did not increase, it went down. So that way, this whole factor goes away for the current year. So, simply stated, you must look at education effort each year now, or we must, together, look at education effort each year as calculated by MSD, Maryland State Department of Education. If we're below the 5-year moving average statewide, then we have to look and see if our wealth increases on a pupil basis. If it does, then whatever that increase is has to be bumped, our MOE is bumped by that increase in our wealth per pupil, up to a maximum of 2.5%. So that's, in a nutshell, how that calculation works now.
So the fact that we are maintaining maintenance of effort, I think, is probably a good thing, strictly based on the fact that we're like 24th in wealth per pupil.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's correct. Yep.
okay. Thank you for
Oh.
going through that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah,
Now, to address that full-time equivalent, for state aid purposes, just so you know, we get education aid from the state for our students that attend the Delaware school. We have to subtract out, for state aid purposes, the students that attend our elementary school that are really Delaware residents.
okay.
That's the huge differential between state aid purposes, FTE, and FTE for building capacity and construction and for teaching.
Maybe in,
That's the-
where you document it, it may be good to note that,
Okay?
just for clarification.
Good suggestion.
Yeah.
Yep. Good suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to take a second to go through, and again, I'll stop at any time anybody has any questions. I just wanted to show you that there were several component parts that made up the budget that are always key to what the board looks at. and I'm sure the council would be interested, and that's the cost of doing business, which is on page 60. In other words, what additional dollars would it take next year to do exactly what we're currently doing in terms of current facilities, current negotiated agreements, and maintaining budgets to meet CPI costs, increases in the cost per living. So on page 60, you'll see $7,361 of cost of doing business. Again, the big ticket item there is the meeting negotiated contracts to recruit and retain a highly qualified workforce, lines 1 and 2. And then the other large item there, as we talked about, is our health insurance, which is part of our fixed charges category. Again, on page 61, as we already talked about, the next component is what are we going to fund in terms of new requests? That's the $409,000. And on page 62, the board always looks at, again, what we've talked about. Are there any one-time items? And then finally, in order to balance the budget, we do have to, again, this year, reduce several budget line items. Page 64, here are our proposed funding reductions, $822,493. And then, so if, on the sheet that I just handed out to you, if you look at the front of that page that I just handed out to you, on the front, there was a recap of how we got from FY 2015 to FY 2016. So the FY 15 budget was $169,594,819. And you'll see those total expenditures for cost of doing business, new requests in priority order, one-time funding requests, and the proposed budget reductions gets us to the new expenditures line of $177,377,424.
Bruce, back on page 60,
Yes.
I noticed on line 6, additional driver hours for county-owned student transport buses and vans. Are you expanding your bus fleet that much? You need $181,000 more dollars to?
We are having to add some additional buses, but the majority of that is to run vans. We have bought vans to transport the homeless. We have
We have 4 vans.
four vans that are now running constantly
Full-time.
full-time to transport the homeless.
But this is an additional, so where would the cost be for all of the bus drivers and van drivers? Where would they be? Which page would they be in here?
All this is in the category of student transportation,
Yeah.
and that is on the category. Detail is on page 103.
So are you finding it more economical to use your own buses and drivers rather than contracting out the bus drivers? Is that what you're finding?
Well, and what's happening is a lot of our in-town
Somebody's
bus.
saying yeah and one person saying no.
A lot of cases,
Well,
that is the case.
I don't know who said no, but anyway, what's happening is a lot of our bus routes are being given up. We just had
2 yesterday.
2 yesterday. They came in and they said, we're not going to do it anymore, we're not going to redo the contract. And they're predominantly the in-town bus routes that are the minimum mileage and minimum hour runs. And so we are having to take those over as a result of that.
But couldn't you, for some reason or another, it's kind of like what we're talking about with our fire departments, it's going to cost one way or the other. I mean, you couldn't increase the pay to those in-town bus routes so the people would stay. Basically, that's probably why they're leaving. They don't find it that they're making any money. We've got to pay one way or the other. I don't think the county can do it. Can the county do it cheaper? I guess that's,
Yeah,
can you all do it cheaper?
We've demonstrated that we can do it cheaper, yes.
You can.
Yeah.
Even
How
with
did you
hiring
demonstrate
people?
that? Did you do a survey?
No, we did the actual number crunching.
When you look at the mileage and the cost driver cost per hour. One
For
the
what period of
difficulties
time?
is-
In the current period.
For just one period?
Well, if you analyze the cost that you pay for a contractor versus the cost that we pay to run these operations internally, we are saving money. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it.
Well, I
We'd
guess
be doing
that
it.
begs the question, why don't you do it universally over the whole system?
Well, that's a board decision. I will turn to the board relative to that.
The board is dedicated to continuing to have that hybrid, because it is a positive relationship with our bus drivers and giving them that opportunity. But what happened yesterday, for example, we had 2 bus routes turned in. After 15 years, they have to either buy a new bus or stop their route. So we had one bus at 14 years and one at 15. And so it's very expensive. It's over $100,000 that it costs these people to, you know,
110.
to get a loan for a bus. And so at that point, and many of our bus drivers have done it for many years, and, you know, they've gotten older, and we haven't had that influx of a younger generation who has been willing and able to take out those loans.
No.
So it's been pretty difficult.
I know at one time, people were standing in line for bus contracts.
Yeah.
And again, it depends upon the route.
Yeah,
The longer the route, the more number of miles and the more number of hours, the more lucrative that it is for a bus driver. The in-town routes is what we are having to assume.
So is that the reason they're giving up the in-town routes?
I think there's multiple reasons. They're just, I think, cost of a new bus is running around $110,000.
Right, I understand that.
And so for some folks, they're doing the P&L analysis, and it's just not making sense for them.
Right, well, the bus costs the same if they go out in the county as well. So
Yeah,
before I-
but their return is much greater.
Out in the
Because they're
county.
out in the county, because they're longer routes.
It's a mileage.
Yeah, mileage and the hours. That's correct.
So I remember cutting down on the buses and buying vans because of distance. The county bus drivers are transporting some of these homeless kids. What are some of the further distances that we have to go? I know, I
Most
think
recently
Dover was one.
Was Millsboro. There's some
Millsboro.
in Laurel, Delaware, Millsboro, Delaware, Somerset County. And so, if that child is living there, then we have to send, and that's why we got the vans. We have to send the van to pick up that child in the
Right.
morning, bring them back to their home school, and then turn around in the afternoon and bring them back home and come back. And that is extremely costly. So there were times that we were sending an entire school bus
A big
with
school
one
bus.
child on the bus. And so we got permission from MSDE to utilize those vans, and we purchased 4, and honestly, those 4 are now being used full-time for our homeless
Wow.
population.
If they're living in Laurel, why are they going to school in
Well, the
Montgomery County?
McKinney-Vento federal legislation says that if a child becomes homeless, they have the opportunity legally, and the parent does, to choose to keep that child in their current school. It's kind of a stability sort of thing, so that they, their whole world isn't completely turned upside down. And the school district of origin, where they were living, has the fiscal responsibility to provide and pay for that transportation.
Well, at what point is that Millsboro student then become a Millsboro resident and not homeless Wycomico County resident?
For as long as they stay, say on September 1st, that child became homeless and they lived in Millsboro the whole rest of the year, we're required for that entire school year to transport that student. Lots of times what does happen is over the summer, say they're going to end up staying in Millsboro we can't require that, but they do end up transferring to the school district in which they're living. But they're, we have to transport them no matter what time in the school year that they end up becoming homeless.
So if the next school year begins, you can say, no, you're in Millsboro.
No, we can't say that. We
You
have to
can't.
still
You
transport
gotta
them, but it
start a
does
new
happen a
school
lot of
year.
times that they do transfer.
Which makes sense. I would understand that.
Yeah.
I'm not meaning this to sound out of order, but if they're homeless, how do you know where to pick them up at? I mean, is there a location that they need to go to, or?
Well, there's specific criteria, and actually, if I knew this conversation, I would have brought that. But for example, if they, say they get foreclosed on and have to move out and live with their grandparents, if there's 2 families living in that home, that family is considered homeless. And
So they're
we have to-
considered homeless if they're living with their grandparents?
Yep. There's in fact, it would be a really good, I'll send all that documentation on, there's a summary sheet on what are the different criteria of what a child is considered as being homeless. I'll send that to you because it's pretty unbelievable in a lot of cases.
Homeless doesn't mean living under the local bridge.
It does not.
Guess I can do
It
it
does not.
homeless. Some gay-
Yeah.
It,
fact,
actually,
they
the
could be living in nicer homes
terminology,
than we are.
actually, the terminology is families in transition.
Yes.
Well, because I've heard you mention you have a lot of homeless students.
Yes.
So that, everybody's like, they were surprised by that large number, but I think people, yeah, if that's the definition, it encompasses a lot more than what most
Yes.
people consider
Absolutely.
homeless. Okay, all
It
right.
is.
Yeah, 'cause I've heard the numbers before from the Board of Ed about homeless, but
Yeah.
still legally, even if they're living with their grandparents in Pittsville, they go to Pemberton, you still gotta.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think, as I recall, it's about 1,200 right now. So if you look at the ones that we do transport, it's very, very small compared to the entire number of homeless or fit students. But it still is very expensive.
Did you say 1,200
I
kids
think
are
it's about
considered
1,200.
homeless?
Yeah, fit
Wow.
is, fall in that fit category.
That's one of our high schools.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can't do anything, I mean, certainly we want to serve those families, but we
Yes.
can't do anything about the rules.
There was some concern, being in the middle of the budget season and, with the requests that were being made, that in the middle of all this, the administrative offices came up with a new building, et cetera, and we were just concerned, about the cost-saving measures that were suggested, if you had any input on where you think the justification is for that. I say that because it is an issue that everyone is discussing at this time.
Yep, we should do, and we anticipated that question coming up. It has become, the board has asked us for quite some time, 3, 4, 5 years, to begin trying to find a place to house central office. And it has actually become a matter of health and safety because of the condition of those portables.
Why don't you hold them, Kathleen, spread the paperwork.
Okay. I think that one.
Baker, you got?
Don needs one too.
Wayne,
Do you have one, please?
okay, thanks.
So we have been looking for quite some time, and in every instance of places that we found, it was extremely expensive, or the rent was extremely expensive, or if there was an opportunity to buy a place, it just didn't fit our needs. And so that has been an ongoing search, and we've been keenly, especially the board has been keenly aware of the safety issues. We did recently have an employee who was hurt in one of the portables, and so it all kind of was a fast transition because we've given you the chronology of events, but just in summary, we got a phone call from the Northgate people who were going to be moving out of that building. And they asked very generously if we wanted the furniture that they were leaving behind. It was the, what's the name of that company?
Nolan.
It's
Nolan
The
Group.
Nolan Company.
Right.
And so we went over to look at that furniture and see if we could use it, because, a lot of our furniture is not very good. And then, as it turned out, that building was available. In doing negotiations, our attorney, Fulton Jeffers, was able to find that, and I'm gonna let Bruce go, Bruce has developed this chronology for us, but he was able to find that at an extremely reasonable price for us to be able to find a new central office. And the advantages of that are many, one being certainly increased productivity. The way we're designed now, people are all out in all different buildings, and the productivity we find is not as good as we would certainly hope. To find a safer place for people to work and have them together. And so all of the things kind of converged at once,
Right.
and that's why it's been such a fast process, because their lease was up May 31st. We had to make a decision and look at, was that an available building that we would be able to utilize? But we're very, very concerned about safety and health.
Kathy, that's 150 people.
About 150, somewhere between 130 and 150, yes it is. Mhm. So Bruce, you want to walk us through the chronology, and then we can talk
Um,
about the cost?
Yeah, just to show you how fast this all happened in terms of the decision-making. March the 20th is when, I believe you were contacted, correct? You were the one who were called?
Yep, they called me.
Employee from the Nolan Group contacted us and expressed interest in donating some furniture. That led Dr. Townsend sending out Mr. Foray and Mr. Langen to observe what was available to be donated. And they ended up finding a tremendous amount of furniture that was sitting in 30,000 square foot of space, and those known as the North Gate Business Park. They also found at that time that it was available for lease, since their lease was expiring on June the 3rd. On the 27th, Mr. Foray and Mr. Langen assessed Dr. Townsend about the situation, and that put into action at that point, based upon a recommendation from Dr. Townsend, that we take a look at this and brief the superintendent and board. And over the next several weeks, I won't go through each one of those dates. You obviously can review those, but it was a fast track effort because of the fact that we had budget that we were dealing with. We had the fact that their lease was expiring on June the 3rd, and they needed to get rid of all of that equipment. All of that equipment, which we're estimating is somewhere around $200,000 worth of equipment. They needed us to get rid of that from the building if we wanted it. And so there was a lot of things that were happening very quickly. This all ended up in various conversations with the superintendent and the county executive, I think on the 16th, and the county council president on the 20th, at least to alert the county executive and the county council of what was transpiring. And then on May the 5th, after the State Department had released the revised revenue numbers for the board, on May the 5th, the superintendent, staff, and legal counsel met to review the draft rental agreement and to amend the budget to reflect this transaction as a result of that additional $1.5 million in state aid. So what I'd like to say at this point is that this isn't something that's happened in a vacuum, not only just in a short period of time, but over a lot of many of years. Because if you look there in the middle of the page on page 3, over the past several years, we've looked at various alternatives to address the annexes. The annexes are over 22-year-old from the time that they were donated to us by a local company. So they're in excess of 30-plus years old. They're depleted. They're requiring constant maintenance. And the board looked at those facilities as a risk management issue. And unfortunately, as Dr. Townsend mentioned too, we've already had one incident that has resulted in injury in the portables. So we've looked at modular replacements. We've looked at renting office space. We've looked at repurposing one of our school facilities for office space. And we've looked at building or purchasing office space. In fact, I asked Mr. Foray to go back and find out when we first started asking in the CIP for funding in, I think he said 2005.
2004, actually.
2004. So in our FY 2004 CIP, we've been asking for assistance to address the central office needs. And then finally, we point out some of the advantages of doing this. And at bottom, there's about 5 bullets there. We see this as providing much-needed space at a fraction of the cost of other relocation options. It vacates the annexes and avoids any further expenditures to the depleted units, and mitigates, very importantly, mitigates any further risk management issues. Provides an annual rental cost that is sustainable and is well within the provisions provided by the additional state aid in the Whatcom County budget, and no additional local funding is being sought.
Jeff?
Yeah, the next bullet you have there is, let's see, the project was tentatively slated to be addressed in the 2017 fiscal year at a cost exceeding $6.7 million for central office administration. What's it gonna cost to revamp the central office to make that a facility for teaching? That's what you're gonna do with it, right?
Well, we're gonna relocate the infants and toddlers, which is, I forget how many staff,
About,
12,
no, it's
13,
more like 17.
17.
So how much is it gonna cost to do the
I-
building?
Actually, the preliminary look that was made on the facility, that they can easily move in some of the existing spaces that we have within some of the buildings. So we're gonna try to keep that down to the minimum, so they can backfill some of those spaces in central.
So you're not gonna have to do any remodeling to the central
We'll
office?
probably have to do some to
Uh-huh.
modify the,
Yeah.
but not much.
I mean, will it be $1 million or $2 million?
Oh,
Or,
no, no,
yeah.
no. In fact, they can
Mhm.
reuse a lot of the existing office configurations that we
Mhm.
have.
Mhm.
We may have to adjust phone systems and
Mhm.
things like that, but I don't think we're gonna have to do much in terms of actual
Mhm.
physical modifications.
Right. Plus, we're able to shed a lease of about 5,000 square feet where they currently are being housed.
Yeah.
That'll save us about
What are you
$45,000.
gonna do with these portables? You're gonna destroy them, have them taken
Eventually,
apart?
we have to take them down.
Yeah,
yes.
okay. They're not gonna donate them to somebody else to have them as their problem. You're not gonna move them to
Well,
another
we-
school?
We have a process to get rid of
Yeah.
assets, but,
Yeah.
I don't think they're worth much. And I
Or you're
don't
not gonna
think
move them to another school or anything
I don't
like
think
that?
they'll be able to be moved. I really don't.
Councilman Kim?
So how much is this yearly again?
The lease is $8.45 a square foot, so about $253,000 annual cost for rental. There'll be CAM too we'll have to pay, but the rent is $8.45 or about $253,000.
And you said you're able to find that in the budget and no additional funding?
No additional request from the county. It's part of the $1.5 million additional that we got from the state. We've incorporated that in
Okay, so
operations.
that's coming from that 1.5
Yes, that's
million.
correct.
Um, I guess, this happened pretty quickly, I mean, because, on your timeline here, I think it was March 17th, and the superintendent was before us saying that, you're looking at repurposing Y Middle or East Salisbury for space, and then, March 20th, this process seemed to have started. How do you know you got a good deal on this? The county does procurement. I haven't been here, but I was here for the, in the audience, for the Board of Elections thing, and there was a process to go through, put out for bid. I guess, again, this is all, I was, just an observer, but it seemed that there was a process to go through to make sure that you weren't getting ripped off by, someone who's trying to pressure you into something quickly. What processes were in place to make sure you got a good deal here?
One
For the
thing that
best deal.
we do know is over the years that we've been looking, the spaces that were not nearly the quality of these have been in the $11, $12 a square foot range. Even recently, some of the ones that we've looked at have been in that range. So we know that $8.45 is a pretty good deal. Fulton, our attorney, also did the negotiation of the lease, and he did a lot of research on what other properties in town would look like and what their leases would be. So we do know that it's a good deal just from our experience.
So state, but, again, I'm not sure what county law is, but state law you don't have to go through kind of competitive process to see if other people can offer you a better deal?
No, the state law for procurement 5-102 requires us, if it's a school building, an improvement, or supplies or equipment. That's what current law is.
But you wouldn't do that anyway.
Well, when we do an RFP or RFQ, which this is similar to that, we do what are called likables or comparables, and that's what Mr. Jeffers did for us.
Councilman Hall?
Can we get a list of the CAM and any other costs associated with this? You've got escalation clauses, I assume.
Well, we have a 3-year deal that it's fixed for 3 years.
Can we get those?
We'll give you a copy of the lease if you'd like.
And I like this, a fraction of the cost of other relocation. High fraction or low fraction?
Very high fraction. If you consider the fact that we're paying about, with Canby, about $300,000 a year, and it would have been just to replace the portables was about almost $6.8 million.
And there's other comparisons, if you look at the, getting rid of the infants and toddlers lease, allowing them, there's almost $50,000 a year that we're saving. If you look at the high utility costs from our portables because they're in such poor shape and difficult to heat and air condition, that would be a savings. There's many pieces to that, but Bruce has actually quantified all that, and we would be glad to send it.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see that.
Do you plan to use that property also for something else besides the toddlers and program?
We haven't made
Expand?
that decision yet. We do know, we've begun preliminary look at what space infants and toddlers will take up. And as you go in the front door, instruction and HR are on the right, and then the auditorium is in the middle, and then administration and finance are on the left. We can pretty easily fit infants and toddlers and child find, they're together, on the right-hand side. So they would utilize that along with the auditorium. We, right now, don't know what plans we're gonna have to elect.
You've got 13 acres, I think, back there, in that area that you could use.
Oh, back behind where the portables are? I'm not sure how big that is.
I'd have to check with it on that because that's really all part of the Wycomico High School project.
Councilman Dodd?
Yeah, as Councilman Kilmer indicated, Dr. Frederickson was in front of us discussing repurposing Bennett Middle School, not Bennett Middle School, but East Salisbury and Y Middle during the Bennett Middle School discussions, and jumped from East Salisbury to Y Middle because it was centrally located, kind of made sense. And I know the board had discussed finding a location that is centrally located. Northgate is almost at Delmar, so it just doesn't seem like it's centrally located.
Actually, it's only about, what, 2.7? Didn't you measure it, Brian? About, I think, 2.7 miles from where the current
Well,
central
you
office
still got all
is.
the traffic and the stores up there and no schools close by, actually, so that's what I was just wondering about that.
Ms. Townsend, I understand what you're saying about the savings for the infant and toddlers and doing all that. That still doesn't reflect on what you're paying for rent. And it was a good deal, I guess, but there wasn't an RFP put out. And I find that to be very disappointing because we've been through that on the county level over the past 8 years since I've been here a couple times when that wasn't done. And we had a lot of questions from the citizens on why it wasn't done. And you say you got a good deal on the rent, but if you didn't put the word out that you were looking for something, you don't know that there wasn't something better. There's a lot of empty buildings around. I don't know if there's a lot of empty buildings that size, but it should have been put out on an RFP. It really should have.
Councilman Dodd?
Yeah, I did have one more question on the $253,000. How long is that lease going to last?
That lease is a 20-year lease.
20 years?
Yes, and we have the ability to purchase that building after 10 years. So we did build in quite a few, what I would say amiable, at least from our standpoint, provisions within the lease, and that's why I'll be glad to share that with you so you can see some of those provisions.
Right, and that is a point that a lot of council members have discussed, people in the public have discussed, is why not purchase property instead?
Yep, we have the
If you have
option.
the option to purchase and we can save money, that does
Yep.
make good sense.
Yep.
The other piece that, we had discussed Y Middle as a possible location. In the feasibility study that Facilities did, it would be in the neighborhood of 30 million to redo Y Middle as an office space. And so if you look at that over the long term and what we're paying for this lease, there's just no comparison of the cost.
Any other questions? Any other budget-related questions? Appreciate you going over the maintenance of effort with us, Bruce, we really do.
Thank you.
Somehow or other, I'd like to get back to some conversation, either with you or with Dr. Frederickson on what he had suggested as some type of public-private partnerships that he was looking into and trying to create. I'd be very anxious to see where that might be heading, because I think that's one good way that would help us as a whole. Keep in mind that, whatever the council might recommend, even if we were to look at making any additions, things like that, the first first consideration we might have to take is to where we would cut something else. And the executive has turned in a very slim budget, it's been trimmed down to the bare bones. So, keep that in mind as well, if you don't mind. Kim?
Johnson, I just wanted to put in a plug again for the school construction savings.
Yeah.
I did bring that, I had mentioned it to you, and
Sure.
I did actually bring a letter. We had sent, I think Bruce had given you documents last time we were here, but I did recopy those documents and have brought you a letter requesting that,
Great.
as a board, you consider relooking at the school construction savings fund. And in these documents, there's 3 specific documents that tell you what are the advantages of the school construction savings fund, what the chronology has been over time of when we had it and then when we did not have it.
Okay.
And then a financial recap, which I think is pretty impressive, of the projects that we have been able to accomplish with the school construction savings fund that we didn't have to come and request bond funding for. So,
Sure.
again, I know you had one copy of this, but this is an official letter that we've asked that you reconsider that
Okay.
for
And
us.
we will be discussing it with the executive.
I think on that issue,
That'd be great.
on that issue, it's gonna be beneficial to both of us.
Oh, yeah.
And it has worked ever since I've been on the board.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
No, I just want to thank you for letting us come up, and anything you can do to help the students of Wycomico County, we really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
And
Appreciate
we'll
your hard work.
continue to have ongoing conversations
Yes.
about West Salisbury and what we will do.
Yes, yeah, both of those, the West Salisbury and the school construction fund. I know those are high priorities with Bob as well.
That'd be great.
So we're getting there.
Well, thank you,
Thank
as
you all
always, for
very
your
much.
support.
Thank you.
We
Thank
appreciate the
you all.
opportunity to come and just talk about what the needs are for the students.
That's why I get it.
Thanks for
you.
your
More pages.
See you, Brian. Thank you.
Appreciate you answering our questions. Thank you.
All righty, thanks.
Matt.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Good day.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Good to see you. Thank you so much.
See you later. Take care.
Physical therapy, so that comes from trying to do things for young people when you're older. Mentally, my bucket list includes playing golf and all of that.
I will too, Pemberton, yes, yes.
The Board of Education got an additional it's, their total budget is It's a shame that they.
It looks that way, I guess.
I don't think so.
I get the purpose of it. I guess the only other dilemma I have, my oldest son has his father from his other son right the same day. So with it being that close together, we can't do anything for my son. So it's not.
We're waiting for 2 council members to come back in. Let's go ahead and get started. We'll be okay. We have a work session in reference to the concession agreement between Wycomico County and the Maryland 7th inning stretch organization. I know we have representation here. Thank you very much. I was telling the council about the interesting ball game last night.
Yeah.
Where the ran on a, what do they call it when they walk them for the last run?
It's a walk-off walk.
Yeah.
Normally like a walk-off home run, but we got a walk-off walk.
Yes. Never seen it before. It was
Yeah.
fun.
Doesn't happen too often.
If you could, gentlemen, introduce yourselves for the public and for the council as well. Make sure you have a mic. I'd have to tell you, we had to do it to share.
Chris Bitters, General Manager for the Shorebirds.
I can't hear you.
Pat Philippone, President of the Shorebirds.
Andy Wisk, Wycomico Recreation Parks and Tourism.
Wayne Strasburg, Director of Administration.
Thank you for being here. Andy, if you'd like to start.
I can give some background and general details, and then get into some questions here.
Okay.
But basically, we're here today because of one man's vision about 20 years ago, and that was Frank Perdue, who had a passion for baseball, and sought to find an answer for the Eastern Shore resident who shared his passion for baseball, to take part in those games without having to drive up to Baltimore for a weeknight game, get back in the wee hours of the morning, and then get up and go to work the next day. So Frank partnered with the Maryland Baseball Limited Partnership and the county to build the current Arthur Perdue Stadium. The total cost of that stadium was about $10 million, and of that, Frank Perdue put up $4 million and donated 39 acres of land. The partnership, the county financed $2.1 million, and the partnership funded the balance of the $10 million stadium. Since that time, ownership has changed a couple of times, and currently Seventh Inning Stretch is the owner of the Delmarva Shorebirds, who are the Class A affiliate of the Baltimore Orioles. The stadium has 5,200 seats. The Shorebirds play about 70 games per year out there. We're hoping more this year. And it's also owned by the county and available for community events. It's used for off-site car sales, the Relay for Life, for the drive-through flu clinic, the USSSA opening ceremonies, any number of things. But there are typically about 100 annual events at the stadium, and total attendance is about 240,000 people a year.
Does that 100 events count Shorebird games?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's about 30.
30 community events beyond that. The stadium does impact the county financially. In the old lease and in the new lease, or the proposed lease, the franchise guarantees $100,000 in amusement tax revenue to the county. The team has met that obligation each year. The franchise generates about $13.4 million in local economic activity, and that yields $693,000 in state tax revenue and about $183,000 in county tax revenue annually. The renewal of this lease and the enhancements to the facility will very conservatively yield $13.8 million in state tax revenue and $3.6 million in local tax revenue over the next 20 years, which is the length of the lease. And the source for that was the Crossroads study that was done 2 years ago in preparation for these lease negotiations. The responsibilities, the stadium's operations, upkeep, repairs, operational costs are all borne by the Shorebirds. The county is responsible for replacement of the mechanical systems, HVAC, boilers, elevators, as well as the shell and roof of the building. The Maryland Stadium Authority, as I said, the study that they commissioned, have been involved in setting the foundation for these lease negotiations through that study. But they're an independent unit of the executive branch of government in Maryland. They partnered with us and with Seventh Inning Stretch to commission the study that gave us the groundwork that we needed. And the results of that study were applied to this lease because overall we're about creating a situation where the Shorebirds can be successful and the community can continue to have baseball right in their backyard. The original bond was $2.166666 million. It was refunded twice to improve the county's position, but it was paid off December 1st of 2014. In several years ago, the county extended public water and sewer to the new stadium. The cost for that phase of that project was about $1.2 million. The franchise agreed to pay $500,000 toward that cost and is repaying the county on each October 1st. That is due to be paid off October 1st of 2016. And the franchisor has made their principal and interest payment each year faithfully. With the new agreement, some major concepts and highlights are that it is, again, a 20-year term agreement.
Is it 22 or 22 and a half? I thought the lease said 22 and a half based on the dates.
It's 20.
20.
20 year.
Okay, we can get to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The lease is contingent on $2,025,000 in funding from the state of Maryland. We did receive $270,000 commitment in this year's budget, and Executive Culver and the administration are working to get a stronger commitment from the governor's office for the balance of that amount. The county will contribute $2,025,000, and seventh inning stretch will contribute $200,000 toward the capital portion of the project, and also approximately $350,000 in equipment upgrades, the things that with the enhancements to the stadium, tables, chairs, concession equipment, things like that that can't be bonded. The seventh inning stretch would fund those purchases. The agreement does maintain the $100,000 per year guarantee on admissions tax for Wycomico County. And under the new agreement, we've structured the mechanical system, the portion of the agreement on mechanical system, such that the shorebirds and the county have agreed upon remaining lifespans based on expert analysis of the mechanical systems that are in place. The shorebirds will maintain and/or replace equipment if they see fit until those lifespans are exhausted. Once they're exhausted, it becomes the responsibility of the county to either maintain or replace those systems once they break. When a system is replaced, the cycle starts over again and it becomes the shorebird's responsibility until that life cycle expires again. Those are the major points. We're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions?
So the county gets $100,000 in tax revenue?
$100,000 in admissions and amusement tax. Which is approximately another $63,000 in local income tax, the indirect.
I'm talking just direct.
Yeah, direct is 100.
Yep.
And how's that, what's that come out of? Does that come out, I mean, how's that calculated, I guess?
It's a percentage tax on the sale of tickets.
It's 10% tax on tickets.
Okay. And seventh inning stretch does not pay the county anything?
Seventh inning stretch pays the county the balance of that $100,000 if it's not met through the gate.
How often does that happen?
It's gotten close a few years to hitting the $100,000, but pretty much each year there's a decent sized check that seventh inning stretch has written the county.
So the ticket buyers buy the tickets, pay the tax, seventh inning stretch pays
The balance.
the balance, so, but nothing else to the county?
No.
Okay.
We're getting the tax revenue as well generated. What was that? Three, a mention of about $2 million over 20 years. Is that
It's
what it-
$3.6 million over 20
Excuse me,
years.
3.6,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and we're
Which
paying-
includes the emissions tax, but also
yeah, which includes the admission tax, and also, yeah, we're
corporate
also paying
tax, income tax.
$2.25 million in just, just, so yeah, that's, all right. Okay, thanks.
2.025.
2.0. Okay.
Quick question I had initially, and the reason I stopped you in the middle there is because on page 2 on the term and funding, you helped me out. It says from July 2015 to December 2037, which I calculated to about 22 and a half years, but I don't know if I'm missing something.
There is,
It's a new 20-year term, there's still a year and a half.
Yeah.
of
A year and a
current
half
lease.
remaining.
So
Lease?
it's replacing the current year lease in Big Well.
Thanks. I was a little confused on differentiating between the responsibilities as far as structure was concerned.
Okay.
On same page 2, when it references the breakdown of the Phase 2, are these all county expenses on the right side here, starting with the 340?
These are total expenses, of
Right.
which the county is funding 2.025 million. The first, Phase 1, I can walk you through this, but Phase 1 has already been bonded, it's already done, it's outside of the $4.5 million renovation to the facility. That was necessary this year in order for the Delmarva Shorebirds to maintain their affiliation with the Orioles, because the stadium, and as it's aging, is no longer up to minor league baseball standards, and we needed to do some things.
The items that are listed here under Phase 2, on the right-hand side, starting with $340,000.
Yep.
Are those county expenses there?
They're county, state, and seventh inning stretch. The total project is 4.25 million. The county's paying 2.025, the state is 2.025, and seventh inning stretch is 200,000.
Okay, because I was trying to separate as far as what these expenses were. I was just, trying to do black and white, what, based on the lease, what were the counts, what obligations the county had. But you're saying all this in here under Orioles agreement and structure and all that
It's all part
is
of
a
the
mix?
whole project. All the money is coming together for the whole, we didn't differentiate individual pieces of the project. The whole project comes together in
There's a scope of work, John. It's basically $4.5 million. And then the cost share is that state's matching the county dollar for dollar. And the Shorebirds are putting in $200,000.
Understood. Maybe more simplistically, on page 3, when it says video board, $600,000, is that the county and the state paying that amount?
That's all part of that scope of work.
But I'm trying to separate this, the 200,000, I'm separating that out. Unless I'm really doing this wrong.
You can't separate it out.
Well, let's
it's
just
a
say the
scope of work.
200,000 is attributed to, the field lighting or something like
It's
that.
not earmarked.
I
It's a total
understand, but
scope
I'm
of
trying
work.
to figure out total dollars contributed towards particular expenses.
It's a total scope of work. It's being borne by seventh inning stretch, the state of Maryland, and the county. We're not
Right.
assigning responsibility by
But the
pieces
lease
of work.
does, in section 5.02,
No, it
it
really
specifically
doesn't.
says, it does, it says the county shall assume responsibility for the service contracts, repair, capital replacement of the stadium, including HVAC, and then down further below, it says the county shall not be responsible for the repair or replacement of the scoreboard, video boards. It's very specific.
That's repairs going forward.
But that's what I'm asking. I mean, we're looking at repairs going forward, 2017, it says video board, $600,000. So my question is, who does pay for that?
That video board, the section 5 refers to the maintenance of that video board beyond its installation. That video board doesn't exist yet. It's part of the scope of work to bring the facility up to a standard where the Shorebirds can remain viable in the marketplace.
I understand, but when the lease itself, and maybe you have to help me, Mr. Baker, when the lease itself says the county should not be responsible for repair or replacement of video boards.
You're confusing the initial investment with ongoing maintenance.
Yeah,
I am confused,
No.
Well, just, maybe I can help clarify. The current lease that's in place now is what section 5 resides in. So the current scoreboards, the city has no responsibility to repair, or replace, or do anything with it. Moving forward is what Wayne and Andy were saying, that the scope of work with the $4.5 million during our negotiations and our understanding is it's a scope of work, this is what it costs to get it done, this is how we're splitting up the costs. Moving forward, we've made virtually no changes to the current lease other than to clarify life cycles. So part of that in the negotiation was we'll continue to honor the video board, scoreboards, for any maintenance, anything that's need to be done with the new one, they'll get installed as part of the scope of the work. We bear the responsibility, fiscal responsibility for keeping it up. And it won't, you know,
For 5 years, then after 5 years, it comes back to the county to repair it.
well, the warranty is for 5 years, I believe.
Then after 5 years, the repairs will be made by the county.
It would be based on what the life cycle of that item is. So you eliminate the scoreboard for, as an example, but if you look at an HVAC unit, so we get a brand new HVAC unit today, we'll ask a couple experts in that field to give us various opinions. How long should that HVAC unit last? They're gonna come in and say this HVAC unit should last 10, 15, 20 years, whatever they say it is. The line in the sand is that number that they've said and we've agreed on for that replacement. So for 20 years, say an HVAC unit, the shorebirds are responsible for all the PMs on them, anything that goes wrong, or if there's a lack of maintenance on our part and it needs to be replaced, if it's a year 15, we're replacing it, because that's it's not had that life cycle yet. At year 20, you know, it's lasted that long, after that is when we would come back to then say, okay, it's last life cycle, 20 years later, this HVAC unit needs to be replaced. What do you want to do as the landlord? You want to replace this thing, or do you guys want to take over the maintenance of it?
Yeah,
So that there's a clear
it
line in the sand
clarifies.
versus there's a clear line of life cycle on these units.
The initial lease didn't have that, so we were constantly, always respectfully
Yeah.
negotiating, but consequently coming up with disagreements, so we're saying, well, this should have been done, and blah, blah, blah. So we wanted to clarify that moving forward, just to eliminate some of that chatter.
So at year 14.5, you'll really be crossing your fingers.
We'll have some supercharged duct tape maybe.
Right.
But,
Well, and it'll really help the county with long-range capital
Oh, sure.
planning. So we'll know exactly where those lines are and can project out.
Will the
better.
plan at that point be to replace it on that year 15, or to see if you can squeeze a couple more years out, but plan for the, you know, an escrow, or whatever, however we want to pay for that?
Typically, what you would do with a freestanding commercial building, triple net lease, you would typically have a provision that a tenant, and I'll call the tenant side and the landlord side many times, but a tenant, if they're in a 20-year lease and a major component fails in the last 5 years, they're not inclined to make a major capital investment in a facility that's going to revert to the landlord in a very short period of time. That's really the concept that we're going towards here. We're assigning reasonable lives to the physical plant and really shifting risk from the county to the shorebirds on the maintenance of those major components. And if we've got our life cycles right, the county is going to be getting something back, say in 20 years. It would be ours unless we extend the lease. But the shorebirds certainly wouldn't want to be, if I was a tenant, I wouldn't want to be in a position where I got 2 years left on my lease and I've got to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a component. So we've tried to negotiate something that's fair to both parties. And this is essentially a modified triple net lease for all intents and purposes.
A couple things. Thank you all for being here, for one. And I think it was last week, John and I took a tour of the facility during our Parks and Rec Commission meeting and looked at the upgrades, and it looks great. It really does. So thank you for that tour. And also thank you for showing me the blueprints and the vision of what it's going to look like. I really like the concept. Phase 3, that is so that the stadium can meet the baseball standards in order to keep the shorebirds there? All these upgrades on phase 3?
portions of it, that's more the fan-centric phase.
Yeah, that's the fan amenities.
Yeah, the fan amenities.
Yes.
So the baseball documents are more field of play, the lights and the clubhouse, so on and so forth. These are more of the business elements.
Okay.
As part of the entire project. It's just scoped out, doing it, because we can't, we obviously don't want to not have a baseball season. So we have to split up the work over 3 different years just to keep us operating.
So Phase 3, fiscal year 2017, is that when you begin the work, or is that when it's going to be complete?
Well, our thoughts are it's going to be completed by opening day 2017.
2017, so then we'll have a new and improved stadium.
For the fan-centric portion, yes, that would be visible to the eye. Most of the other things from Phase 1 and Phase 2 are all structural, behind the scenes.
Some of the things you're currently working on now.
Correct. Phase 1 is basically done.
At the start of next season, Mr. Dodge will have a new infield,
New playing field.
or new field. That
New
field
field.
is a prescription field with an engineered drainage system that's outlived its lifespan. Most major league caliber stadiums do field replacement about every, 2 to 4 years, Chris? And we've gone 20 years on this field. We're also replacing the field lighting fixtures because they're now not up to minor league standards. As they age, they get dimmer and they're also less efficient. So there's going to be some cost savings there operationally for the Shorebirds. But and we're going to add some other we have some other structural items and some minor things like field padding, bird netting is part of that to try to aid in not allowing bird droppings to pile up on us. And there's a whole list of things.
And that's where I was leading, because you went over this during our tour, and thank you for taking over with that.
How important is this circulation deck? I know we put it off, basically. Somebody said when we were talking about it that wasn't a big priority. How important is that as far as the game goes?
Well, it's very important as far as the fan enjoyment level in any facility now, that if you constructed one new would have one.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the major renovations for major league facilities down to minor league facilities do add that, just for the circulation patterns of fans, how they want to enjoy the game. So it's crucially important to the project.
I mean, I see it's a big portion of that, that in Phase 3.
One thing we did, Mr. Holloway, is we added a clause down in E underneath the schedule of costs where the county is not going to go above $441,000, and we're going to work to value engineer that piece of the project. It's one of the last priorities on the list, and we'll see how the project in total is lining up. And if the cost comes in above that, it'll be a seventh inning stretch determination as to whether or not we want to proceed.
And I've been to a lot of minor league stadiums, and all the ones that I've been to have that walk around, it's used. You see the fans out there, so it's something that might be beneficial.
Yeah, we think without a doubt it'll be beneficial to the market.
So this, I understand, the state money isn't as much as was expected. The county, we've already sold a bond. Is that correct for this?
Yes.
So is anything going to be done until the state, is all the money just being saved until the state money comes, or is county money being used on repairs right now?
We have used some money on just basic repairs to the building, but in terms of the scope that you're looking at, Mark, we really have to have a firm commitment from the state before we undertake the significant,
Yeah.
and the Shorebirds want that commitment as well. We had a situation where in the transition from one administration to the next, this got lost.
Yeah. No, I understand.
But we certainly have had reassurances from the governor, from the Speaker of the House, and from the Senate President that they understand the importance of this project and that the funding will come. We're going to look for some pretty hard commitment before we undertake expenditure of county funds.
And what's so we do all this, we spend all this money,
Mhm.
agree to this, they guarantee the Shorebirds going to be around for 20 years? Are we going to get, this $2 million? What's,
That's a question for the Shorebirds.
There is a guarantee in the lease.
Okay.
And yes, it's our full intentions to be relevant within the market and within baseball for 20 years.
Well, stuff happens, as you know.
Absolutely.
Obviously you're not planning on going out of business in 5 years, but let's say you do.
As part of the lease is, two things. As part of the lease, if we were to leave the market, there's a guarantee that is repaid back, basically, for lack of
county's portion,
The county's
and there
So we're
was
protecting
in the
ourselves
prior.
on the downside.
And there was in the original lease, is that, you know, that money that the county bonded to upgrade the facility, if we left for whatever reason, which we're not planning to do, that would be paid back. And number two, I guess, I don't know if you want to address the question I'm going, you can't really fold a affiliated minor league baseball team, we just can't go away. I guess is I don't know how you
Yeah, I mean,
explain that, but
there's
move
There's,
we can
well, you
move,
can
but that's
move,
where you.
that's where the guarantee
That's
comes
where
in.
we get paid.
There's no, again, as you perfectly put it, there's zero intention, I hope, to be coming back in 20 years and talking about phases 4, 5, and 6, but,
And we'll all be here.
absolutely, absolutely, I hope we're all here. May of 2035, but no, we have no intention of moving, and we can't, because there's guaranteed affiliates, we can't not exist because there's guaranteed affiliates to Major League Baseball as part of our partnership with them. The county's interests are protected because if somehow we sold the franchise and wanted to move, then we'd have to pay the county back for the unamortized portion of what you invested into this, for the renovation.
Wayne, when will this be coming back for finalization?
You have a public hearing on June, the first meeting in June.
Don't laugh about the 20 years I was here when it was first brought up.
There you go. Did it go quick?
Huh?
Did it go quick for you?
Oh, 20 years? Yeah, man, it's flew by.
Yeah. I see
It's
you
like
in 20
just
more.
like a fast pitch. It's gone really quick.
Any other questions? Thank you, appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Appreciate it.
Missed it.
There in West Virginia, that's a big part.
When they come back, West Virginia will be here.
Wayne, could you come here a minute? Could you sit down here and explain to me and John and the rest of them what you explained a few minutes ago about what the Board of Ed could have done besides what they did do?
They'll leave in 3 minutes.
Yeah. About the lease and what they could have built.
Yeah, Joe had asked me the question. I think you recall that I gave you a net present value on the rental stream. And the rental stream is really about $316,000 a year when you add in CAM. The rent is flat for the first 3 years, then it escalates by the CPI. The purchase option that they mentioned comes after the 10th year, and it's basically an option at fair market value. So it's not really an advantageous.
Now say that again. The lease is for 10 years. They're committed for 10 years.
20.
Well, I'm talking about before they can buy.
Well, they could exercise purchase option in the 10th
After
year,
10
but,
years.
but it isn't what I would call a bargain purchase option
Right.
because you've got the option to buy it at fair market value. Well, everybody has the option to buy it at fair market value.
That's what I was wondering.
The state's attorney's office, just to give you a comparison, the state's attorney's office is 18,300 square feet. We bought it for $4 million. That's $218 a square foot. So if you multiply that out at 30,000 square feet, you're talking about buying something in fee for $6.5 million.
So they've done a lot better. We could have done a lot better by buying something instead of going out and leasing
Not
this.
necessarily.
I'm not sure, to go to your point, Joe, you don't know that until you really go out and do an RFP.
Well, they didn't do that, though.
I'm
See,
just saying, I can't say whether it's a good deal or a
Yeah,
bad
see,
deal.
that's my issue. They
Right.
did not do an RFP. And,
What about the $8 a square foot compared to prices in the market?
It's $8.5 a square
It's not,
foot.
not a bad price.
That's what I would call a reasonable rent in an industrial park. I'm not, the rent itself doesn't bother me. It's just simply that if you're gonna lease something for 20 years, and at the end of the 20 years,
Yeah.
what do you have? I would have much rather seen a more serious effort at fee interest, but
two things, the other thing bothered me is this thing happened so quick. You know, I mean, like I said, there was no RFP put out, so there was really no comparison to know if they got a good deal or not, you know? And if you could have, comparing that to building and remodeling the state's attorney's office, we did that for less money, right? But we own it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a smaller, I mean, it's
17,000.
less space.
No, I'm not talking about the space, but as far as square footage goes, yeah. We probably, it would have been a better deal. Yeah. Okay.
I would
We'll have
prefer
other
that.
opportunities to discuss with the.
Yeah, it's
whoever.
fine. I
Done
did,
deal
while
with
he was
either
here,
way.
because I asked him the question out there a while ago, yeah.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
All right.
Meeting's adjourned.